Today, in this two-part series on coercion and how it affects reunion, I'm going to look into some hidden issues of coercion during the adoption relinquishment process. Coercion strips away an expectant mother's freedom of choice, employing tactics like psychological pressure and withholding crucial support information. This not only manipulates mothers into surrendering their children, but it also inflicts long-term psychological and emotional harm. From corrupt adoption agencies that fuel coercive tactics to the critical need for informed consent, I'm going to delve into the coercive tactics used to manipulate women into relinquishing their children and how these practices affect expectant moms turned birth moms in the long run. Let's get into it. So I really wanted to start with defining what coercion is in the adoption process. Adoption coercion is any practice that restricts or removes an individual's freedom of choice to ensure that the mother will surrender her child for adoption. So coercion renders a mother unable to make a free decision. When coercion is applied, the mother has not made a decision because there is no freedom of choice. She has not given up her child for adoption. Her baby has been taken from her by those who manipulated her to produce the desired result, which is adoption. So let me give you some examples of these coercive tactics that are used even today in adoption agencies and by society. And so I'm going to start out with psychological coercion. There are a couple subsets of that, and I will give you examples of each. So the first subset is to convince you that you were unfit as a mother and thus had to give your baby to people more fit or more deserving. Examples are: you were told that you were unfit to be a mother because you were unwed. You were told that keeping your baby would be selfish. You were forced to draw up a list comparing what you could give to your baby and what adopters could give. And the example of that is right here. You were told that surrendering your baby is an expression of how much you love your baby. Underlying message here is if you keep your baby, then you don't love your baby. You were told that adoption is thinking about what is best for your baby. Underlying message here is adoption is best for your baby. The second form of psychological coercion is to convince you that you have an emotional obligation to surrender your baby. You were told that you cannot keep your baby as your baby has been promised to someone already. You were encouraged to have adopters pay for your medical or living expenses such that you felt you owed them your baby. You were told by your parents that you could come home once you had disposed of the problem. Example, surrendered your baby. You were encouraged to have the adopters in the labor or delivery room with you for the birth of their baby, and thus you felt you could not bear to disappoint them by changing your mind. The third type of psychological coercion is to remove from you all personal support systems and make you reliant on adoption professionals for advice, counseling, and emotional support, to distance you from any person who might try to provide alternatives to surrender. Examples are: your family members or boyfriend were discouraged by adoption professionals from helping you. Telephone use was restricted in maternity home or wage homes. Your boyfriend was lied to by adoption professionals that the baby was not his. You were encouraged to distrust anyone who didn't support you surrendering your baby. And the fourth type of psychological coercion is to psychologically and physically distance you from your baby in order to increase the probability that you would surrender, to ensure that surrender of your baby was seen by you as inevitable. Examples are: your baby was taken from you at birth by either medical professionals or prospective adopters. Your access to your baby in the hospital was severely restricted by medical and/or nursing staff. While still pregnant, you were labeled a birth mother to put you into the mindset that your only role in the life of your child was to give birth. You asked for your baby and were told that it was best that you did not see your baby. Your signature was obtained while under the influence of mind-altering drugs administered to you by medical staff. You asked for your baby back and the adopter stalled until the revocation of consent period had expired. And the fifth and last type of psychological coercion is to psychologically traumatize you to decrease the chances of bonding with your baby. You were left isolated and alone during labor. Information about labor and delivery was deliberately kept from you, such that you were scared and traumatized by the unfamiliar process once labor began. You were called derogatory names or otherwise insulted by doctors, nurses, or medical personnel during your pregnancy, labor, or birth. Now, there also is financial coercion, which is basically to make you feel financially pressured to surrender. And I add a note here. Young single mothers are often in a financially vulnerable situation anyways, and thus financial coercion is often a major factor. Examples of this are you are told or led to believe that no social assistance was available that would provide you with the financial support necessary to enable you to keep your baby. You were told near or after birth that if you changed your mind, you would be liable for paying the medical bills and other costs beyond your ability to pay. In addition to this, there is just outright fraud. And it's basically to guarantee the surrender of your child. Examples are, you were told at some point that the adoption was final and found out later that it wasn't. You were told that there were no alternatives. Information about social assistance was withheld from you. You were led to believe that a promise of open adoption was a legally binding agreement and the adoption was later closed. You were told you would get over it and be able to return to your normal life. Lastly, there is just simply withholding information from the mother. And this is basically to make you surrender by withholding known information about risks or negative consequences that otherwise would have made you say no. Examples of this are information withheld about the known lifelong implications, risks, and emotional consequences of surrender. Information withheld about options that would enable you to keep your baby. Information withheld about your right to independent legal counsel to explain the legal document you were signing and the legal ramifications of it, and to be present in the room to protect your rights as you signed it. Information withheld about the existence of a revocation of consent period. You were not permitted to read the documents you were signing, and you were not given a copy of the documents you signed. I did not get copies of the documents I signed. I could probably also check off about 10 to 15 of these other ones. As we delve into the coercive tactics within the adoption process, it's really crucial to understand how these practices do not exist in a vacuum. They are deeply entwined in family and society perceptions. Next, we'll explore the stigmas about expectant mothers and shed some light on the profound impact that these judgments have on coercion and isolation. So the biggest category that I have heard birth moms discuss about the misconceptions or judgments that were passed on them really fall into the irresponsible / unable to parent category. And that includes things like being careless, being too young, financially unstable, single, on drugs, or an alcoholic. Those types of misconceptions and judgments were passed on them, and they were coerced into adoption. And those misconceptions, those perceptions of people that would make them unfit, those were coercive tactics that were used. So those judgments, those misconceptions and perceptions that society or family has on an expectant mothers can really lead to feelings of coercion and feeling like you want to isolate yourself. Those feelings might include coercion through stigma. The fear of being judged as selfish or irresponsible can pressure expectant moms into making decisions that align with society expectations rather than what feels right for them and their child. This societal pressure can act as a form of coercion, pushing them towards adoption even if they have reservations. Isolation due to misunderstanding. When society views expectant moms through a lens of stereotypes, it can lead to a profound sense of isolation. Expectant moms may feel misunderstood by those around them, including their own support networks, which can make it difficult to express their feelings or seek help. Fear of judgment. The anticipation of being judged for their decision can lead expectant moms to isolate themselves, avoiding conversations about their pregnancy or adoption process. Internalized shame. Constant exposure to negative stereotypes can lead expectant moms to internalize these judgments, feeling shame about their decision. This shame can make them feel unworthy of support or connection, exacerbating feelings of isolation. Barrier to support. Misconceptions can create barriers to accessing support, both emotionally and practically. Expectant moms might feel there's no space in their community that understands their experience without judgment, making it challenging to find understanding or empathy. Impact on mental health. The combination of feeling coerced into a decision due to societal pressure, coupled with isolation and lack of support, can have a significant impact on birth moms' mental health. It can lead to feelings of depression, anxiety, and trauma, which further isolates them from potential sources of support. Making society and family less pushy about what it thinks is right, especially when it comes to big life choices like adoption, is super important. When everyone around is more open-minded and less judgmental, people making these tough decisions, like expectant moms, won't feel forced into choosing something that doesn't fit for them. It's about giving everyone the space to make choices that are truly best for them without fear of being looked down upon or talked about. This way, everyone can feel supported and respected, leading to healthier and happier lives. Simply put, a less coercive society means people feel freer to choose their own paths, creating a more understanding and compassionate community for everyone. Having unpacked all those societal judgments that amplify feelings of coercion and isolation, it's vital to distinguish between legal consent and emotional coercion many expectant moms experience. This distinction sheds light onto the complex nature of consent in the adoption process, a topic we'll dive into next. So let's discuss the difference between giving legal consent and feeling emotionally coerced. Legal consent means agreeing to something freely and with full understanding. It's like saying yes because you really want to, knowing all the details. Emotional coercion, on the other hand, is when someone feels pushed into saying yes, not because they want to, but because they feel pressured, scared, or guilty. While legal consent has clear and strict rules, you need to know what you're agreeing to, and it has to be your choice. Emotional coercion is trickier. It's about feeling forced by someone's words or actions, which might not be so obvious. This difference shows why it's so important to make sure that when someone agrees to something, they're doing it because they genuinely want to, not because they feel that they have to. When someone doesn't fully understand a decision or feels pressured into making it, the fallout can be pretty tough. Imagine agreeing to something without all the facts, or because you're scared of what might happen if you don't. Later on, you might feel trapped, regretful, or realize that it wasn't what you wanted at all. This can lead to a lot of stress, hurt feelings, and sometimes more serious problems depending on the situation. It's like being in a boat without oars. You're not in control, and you're at the mercy of where the current takes you. That's why it's super important to understand what you're agreeing to, and that you're doing it because you want to, not because you feel like you have no other choice. Informed consent is like getting a full manual before you play a new game. It means knowing all the ins and outs, the risks and the benefits of the decision before you dive in. This is super important because it puts you in the driver's seat of your own life. You get to make choices based on real, complete info, not just a guess of what someone else wants. It's like picking a movie you actually want to watch, not just going with what someone else has picked for you. With informed consent, you are in control, making decisions that are best for you. which leads to less regret and more satisfaction down the road. It's all about making sure you're fully clued in and cool with your choices, giving you the power to steer your life in the direction that you want it to go. Informed consent is necessary in order for an expectant mother to be free from coercion. Informed consent to adoption can only be given once the mother has recovered from childbirth, usually considered a minimum of 6 weeks. To ensure that the following 3 necessary prerequisites to informed consent. Pregnancy and birthing hormones have returned to pre-pregnancy levels. Any resulting postpartum depression has been diagnosed and treated, and the mother has a significant bonding time with her baby in an environment free from coercive elements. Exploring the nuances between legal consent and emotional coercion reveals the deep emotional undercurrents of the adoption process. Let's now shift our focus to the psychological emotional impact on birth moms, understanding how these experiences shape their lives long after the adoption papers are signed. When a mother has been coerced into surrendering her baby for adoption, she is at a high risk for multiple lifelong repercussions. These consequences can include severe unresolved grief, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, relationship and parenting difficulties, self-esteem issues, and physical health complications resulting from stress. She may feel exploited, used, and suffer dire future regret, especially if she realizes later how she wanted to keep her baby and how she was manipulated or forced to surrender. Coercion can have profound effects on the brain, impacting both psychological well-being and physical brain structure. When someone is subjected to coercion, it often involves intense psychological pressure, manipulation, or threats, leading to stress and anxiety. Here's how this can affect the brain. First, stress response activation. Coercion can trigger the body's stress response, leading to the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones prepare the body for a fight or flight reaction. In the brain, the amygdala, which processes emotions, becomes more active, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking and decision making, becomes less effective. This can impair judgment, reduce cognitive function, and increase emotional reactions. Changes in brain chemistry and structure. Prolonged stress and anxiety due to coercion can alter brain chemistry and even lead to structural changes. For example, prolonged exposure to cortisol can damage neurons in the hippocampus, which is crucial for memory and emotional regulation. This can lead to difficulties in learning, memory, and managing emotions. Mental health effects. Coercion can lead to mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. These conditions are associated with changes in brain function and structure, including altered activity in the prefrontal cortex, amygdala, and hippocampus. For instance, individuals with PTSD may have a hyperactive amygdala, leading to increased fear and emotional responses and a reduced size of the hippocampus. Impaired decision making. The stress and anxiety from coercion can impair decision-making processes. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and impulse control, can become less effective under stress, leading to poor choices and increased susceptibility to further coercion. Emotional and social consequences. Coercion can lead to a state of learned helplessness where the individual feels they have no control over the situation. This can decrease motivation, increase feelings of helplessness, and lead to social withdrawal. Over time, this can impact social relationships and lead to isolation, which further affects mental health and well-being. Resilience and recovery. It is important to note that the brain is resilient and can recover from the effects of coercion, especially with appropriate support and intervention. Therapy, social support, and stress reduction techniques can help mitigate these effects, promote recovery, and rebuild resilience. As we conclude today's exploration of coercion in the adoption process, our journey brings us to a crucial juncture, the reunion. For birth moms navigating the complexities of reconnection, this moment underscores the profound importance of addressing past coercion and working through the trauma inflicted from it. The path to healing and understanding is paved with open conversations and shared experiences, highlighting the necessity for ongoing support and respect for all involved. Thank you for being part of this vital dialogue. Please continue to support this cause by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more insightful content. Together, we can contribute to a more compassionate and understanding adoption community. See you in part 2. Bye-bye.